So, good evening. I'm Dr. Elaine Campman Green. No, not that kind of doctor. The kind that's been around since 1652. You know, the real kind of doctor. And yes, I did have to Google that for the purpose of this set, as despite how us PhDs like to appear, we're not all knowing, or Dr. Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory. So I volunteered, if volunteer's the word, to expose the ins and outs of being a healthcare scientist today. I'm lead healthcare scientist for a trust. I could tell you which one, but the NHS have hitmen watching for that kind of data breach. I can, however, tell you that it is nothing but glamorous. My day-to-day is filled with the most exciting paperwork, swabs, and bloody surgical instruments. No, I mean it. If the police were ever looking at my Dropbox photos, they'd arrest me as some form of serial killer. And you can't be a scientist without commitment. I regularly commit to draining my friends and colleagues of large volumes of blood. As Kip knows, work with me, you get stabbed for the good of science. That isn't even the weirdest thing I've done for science. On my way to the most amazing job in the world planet, and I do mean the current one, I started out as a zoologist. Now, when I say zoologist, people think big, cute animals, or if you're a geek like me, the werewolf movie Dog Soldiers. Sadly, the truth is neither of these things. I once spent 3 days conducting an animal behaviour study on a giant tortoise. I kid you not. 72 hours of staring at a tortoise and every 10 minutes writing, still moving right foot. In fact, the reason I ended up as a microbiologist was because of an amazing week spent in the Lake District. The Lake District, one of our national treasures, a bit like Stephen Fry or Matt Hancock. A place of special scientific interest where so much exciting and rare science is undertaken and has inspired poets, painters, and people who like to walk up hills. This was my chance to make my first impact as a scientist, my first chance to make a difference. As it transpired, it was also my first chance to spend a week staring at piles of shit in the rain. As part of my final year project, I was given what in itself was a weird enough title. Does dungfly mating success relate to testes size? The answer, by the way, is yes. It, like so many things, comes back to who has the biggest balls, even in science. A bit niche, I thought, but okay. So I turn up at my new home in the Lake District in October and discover it's pretty much a field. When I say pretty much, it was in fact 3 fields and a hut. Now, I don't know how many of you experienced late October in the Lake District, but my one word to sum it up was torrential. It pissed it down every day, all week. On my first day, I gradually discovered that the experimental design required me to sit by my choice of either cow or sheep pats. Shit. Literal shit. Switching giant piles of shit every 3 hours to ensure they were fresh and to count and then capture dungflies mid-mating. Apparently, the way you determine dungfly mating success is to see how many females the male can procreate with over a 30-minute period. I went to university in Liverpool, so this concept was not completely unknown to me. I've seen many a man try to shag a group of girls with about as much success. The fresh part was the capturing the male post-sex, freezing them to dissect out their balls and relate it to coital success. You see, I told you my science serial killer phase started early. After a week of this, I decided maybe lab science was the way forward. So here I am, a microbiologist, having gone from studying big things to tiny things. You would have thought that move alone would have saved me from days of discomfort and potential death. You would be wrong. Being a healthcare scientist in microbiology is great. As I said, it's one of the best jobs on the planet. It's also underfunded, traditionally controlled by my medical colleagues, and like the organisms themselves, mostly invisible. To make a difference, to make a real difference and change patients' lives, you need money, lots of money. I'm talking Scrooge McDuck levels of money. To get money, you need to either apply for research funding or sell your soul. I've known scientists who've gone both ways. My soul wasn't worth very much at last valuation due to, as I've already said, not being that kind of doctor. So I decided to become a clinical academic instead. It's like selling your soul, but there's less sleep and more spreadsheets involved. The part of living the dream from watching scientists on TV and in movies is that you get to go to exotic places and meet some really interesting people. As I said, I work as a lead healthcare scientist in a mega glamorous way. And normally for me, that involves working in a windowless, unventilated, converted bathroom cubicle that is my office. I mean, it still has on-call bathroom sign on the door. And I've been warned if I don't open the door at least once every 7 hours, I may suffocate. Now that's one way for Kip, my deputy, to get promoted. So if I'm found dead, investigate her first and assure the police I am not a serial killer when they chop my Dropbox for clues. My bathroom, after all, is a piece of prime real estate. It's got functional lighting and everything. Now, it was in this most exotic of spaces that I got a call from my professor and clinical academic mentor. Now, my professor is a medic, but he's also a great guy. But as a medic, I often find that all the TV-style trips to glamorous and exotic places are passed to his medic mentees rather than me. This is not a problem. After all, this girl has her bathroom. What else could she want? So, on the call, we were chatting about a whole bunch of funding he was applying for, and I was doing my normal paying complete and undivided attention, whilst simultaneously filling in soul-related spreadsheets, doodling on post-it notes, and uploading the Felicitys grisly photos to my Dropbox. Suddenly I hear the words, "Do you fancy being involved with a project in Bali?" My ears perk up. My vision is filled with images of cocktails and white pristine beaches and lab meetings overlooking the ocean. I almost spit out my tea in my eagerness to volunteer. Apparently, he's applying for some Gates Foundation funding to reduce infant mortality in Bali. Now, the people who have so much funding you can swim in it are the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And although my geographical knowledge is pretty much zero, I know a lot about how to dream of once-in-a-lifetime holidays. This is my moment. It's finally paying off. So I spend the next several months writing text. I don't see the whole application, but there's nothing new in that. I'm often kept in the dark and called in to promote and provide the science. Then I get summoned to a Zoom call with the WHO. Me, little old me, a scientist, a dung-fly murdering scientist, is finally being called into the room. So I grab a cup of tea. I, like all scientists, function on caffeine alone, and walk to my prof's office building for the call. I'm determined not to be intimidated or overwhelmed, and most of all, to try and not make a fool of myself. The call begins, and everything's going really well. Everyone seems to be listening to me, and I'm on cloud nine. I matter. I've got this. The talk turns to practicalities. Practicalities of undertaking a trial in a French-speaking country and how we get everything translated. That's interesting, I think. I didn't realise they spoke French in Bali. Not only am I adding something, but I'm learning something. Talk continues. I swallow my tea. Discussion turns to whether the current unrest will impact the study. So now I'm aware there's potential unpleasantness if you don't pay your cocktail bill on time, but I wasn't really aware that of any terrorist activity in Bali that would mean travelling there would be a risk. I start paying more attention and my vision of beaches somewhat shifts. Then they start sharing a map of the villages they're going to include. The country is landlocked. There is no ocean on the map that they are showing. I begin to panic. Surely Bali has beaches. I've seen pictures. I've heard tales from friends who've been, and my eyes start to frantically search the screen, and I finally find the name of the country shown. Mali. Where the hell is Mali? I'm smiling and nodding whilst bringing my phone up under the desk, keeping it outside, and desperately start to Google Mali. Let me tell you about Mali. Mali is, I have again resorted to Google, a republic in West Africa. Landlocked, been in the middle of a civil war since 2012, currently in the middle of a military takeover and in the midst of an ISIS insurgency. Finally, and most importantly, Mali is not Bali. My image of beaches and cocktails shifts and transforms into one of desert vistas, military camouflage, guns and beheading. But hey ho, at least it's not the Lake District.